She invited the janitor to the gala as a joke. 300 guests lifted their champagne glasses, waiting for him to fail. The billionaire CEO smiled like the room already belonged to her. His little daughter watched from behind the velvet curtain, holding her breath. No one knew the man in the grey work shirt had once made concert halls weep. And when his first note touched the piano, the laughter died before it could reach the chandeliers. Nathan Whitaker stood beside the black grand piano with a folded cleaning cloth in one hand and the quiet posture of a man who had learned not to answer cruelty with noise. Harrington Tower glittered above downtown Chicago, 58 stories of glass, marble, money, and carefully rehearsed generosity. Outside, February wind pushed against the windows like an unwanted guest. Inside, gold light spilled over white tablecloths, crystal glasses, evening gowns, tuxedos, and donors who had paid $10,000 a seat to be seen caring about children's music programs. At the center of it all stood Claire Harrington, 36, brilliant, beautiful, and cold enough to make kindness feel like a corporate strategy. She had built Harrington Global into a billion-dollar empire, and tonight's gala was supposed to prove that she had inherited not only her mother's fortune, but her mother's heart. Yet the old piano on stage said otherwise. It had belonged to Evelyn Harrington, the beloved pianist whose portrait hung behind the podium, smiling softly above a room that no longer understood softness. Nathan had been cleaning near the stage when the featured performer's cancellation reached Claire through a trembling assistant. The program had a gap. The donors were restless. The cameras were still rolling. Then Preston Blake, a board member with polished teeth and a voice made of expensive habits, nodded toward Nathan and said, "Let the janitor play. People love a humble moment." Claire looked at Nathan as if seeing him for the first time, though he had emptied her office trash every night for 9 months. "Mr. Whitaker," she called, her voice smooth enough to sound harmless. "You clean around this piano every evening. Surely you've learned at least one song." A ripple of laughter moved across the ballroom. Someone near the front whispered, "Maybe he'll play with the mop." Another added, "This should be adorable." Nathan's eyes lowered, not in shame, but in restraint. He was used to being mistaken for less than he was. Less educated. Less worthy. Less human under fluorescent service lights. He thought of rent due Friday, Lily's heart medication waiting at the pharmacy, and the bus ride home that would take 40 minutes if the snow held off. He thought of walking away. Then he saw Lily behind the velvet curtain, 9 years old in a blue thrift store dress, her small hands pressed together under her chin. She had begged to see a real gala, just once. She had wanted to hear music in a room where the ceiling looked like heaven. Nathan placed the cloth on the piano bench. The room leaned forward for embarrassment. Claire lifted her chin for control. Preston smiled for the cameras. Nathan sat down, touched the keys gently, and brought back a song Claire Harrington's mother had taken to her grave. The first sound was not loud, but it moved through the ballroom with the weight of a confession. It was a low, trembling note, followed by another so tender that even the servers stopped between tables with silver trays balanced in their hands. Nathan did not look at Claire. He did not look at Preston. He looked only at the ivory keys, as if each one remembered a name he had tried for years not to say. For 9 months, he had passed that piano during the quietest hours of Harrington Tower, usually after midnight, when the executives had gone home and the building belonged to humming vents, elevator chimes, and the soft sweep of his broom. He knew the pattern of the place better than anyone who owned it. He knew which conference room lights flickered in winter, which marble step needed caution after rain, which office plant Claire forgot to water until her assistant rescued it. To most people, he was a grey shirt, a badge, a cart with wheels that squeaked near the service hall. But outside that glass tower, he was everything to one small girl. At 5:30 each morning, Nathan rode the westbound bus back to a third-floor apartment in Logan Square, carrying a lunch pail, tired knees, and whatever dignity the night had not managed to take from him. Lily would usually be awake before his key turned, sitting at the kitchen table with her homework open and her hair tied unevenly because she liked doing it herself. She had her mother's smile and Nathan's steady eyes, and when she said, "Good morning, Daddy," the whole apartment felt warmer than the old radiator could ever make it. He cooked oatmeal, packed her school bag, checked the small orange bottle beside the sink, and pretended not to count the pills twice. Money was always a narrow bridge. Rent. Utilities. Bus fare. Doctor visits. A replacement winter coat he kept delaying for himself because Lily needed new shoes. He never told her how close the numbers came. Children deserved truth, but not every burden. So he gave her grace in small American ways: pancakes on Saturdays, library books on Sundays, hot chocolate after school when snow made the sidewalks shine. In the corner of their living room sat an old electric keyboard under a faded quilt. 2 keys stuck, 1 speaker crackled, and the power cord had to be taped at a certain angle. Lily loved it anyway. "Play with me," she used to ask. Nathan would smile, touch her shoulder, and say, "You make the music now, sweetheart." She did not understand why his hand sometimes hovered above the keys, close enough to remember, too afraid to begin. He had once filled halls with sound. He had once worn black suits instead of work shirts. He had once believed talent could carry a family safely through any storm. Then life taught him that applause did not hold a hand in the hospital, did not pay a late bill, did not explain to a child why her mother was never coming home. So he put music away. He chose silence, not because he was empty, but because some rooms inside a man must stay locked until love gives him permission to open them. And now, beneath the chandeliers, in front of 300 strangers who had expected a joke, Nathan Whitaker played like a father who had survived everything except forgetting. Claire Harrington had not expected memory to arrive. Through the hands of a man she barely knew. She stood near the front table in a silver evening gown that made every camera turn toward her, her blonde hair swept into a graceful knot, her posture perfect, her face composed with the kind of beauty people mistook for peace. But peace had never lived easily inside Claire. Control had. Schedules had. Contracts had. The sharp, clean language of profit had. Feelings, in her world, were liabilities that leaked into boardrooms and weakened negotiations. That was what she told herself each morning while crossing the private corridor to her office, past framed magazine covers and photographs of handshakes with senators, governors, and founders who smiled because Harrington Global could make them richer. Her employees called her brilliant. Her critics called her ruthless. Her donors called her generous when the cameras were present. Yet none of them knew that every December she unlocked a small drawer in her penthouse, touched a faded concert program with her mother's name printed across the top, and cried without making a sound. Evelyn Harrington had once made music feel like a doorway to heaven. In Claire's childhood home outside Lake Forest, Sunday mornings carried the scent of coffee, cedar polish, and fresh bread from the kitchen while Evelyn played in the sunroom with the windows cracked open toward the garden. Little Claire would sit under the piano, knees tucked to her chest, listening to notes fall around her like warm rain. Her mother never performed to impress her. She played to tell her she was safe. Then illness came quietly, turning rehearsals into appointments, concerts into cancellations, and lullabies into whispered promises beside white sheets and flower vases. Claire was 16 when Evelyn passed, old enough to understand loss, too young to forgive it. After the funeral, she closed the piano, went away to college, and built a life where nothing depended on tenderness. That was why tonight mattered and why it hurt. The gala carried Evelyn's name, but Claire had turned it into a flawless corporate ceremony with sponsorship banners, luxury auctions, and a guest list measured by net worth. She had told herself it was legacy. In truth, it was armor. Nathan's melody slipped under that armor without asking permission. The second phrase made her fingers tighten around the stem of her water glass. The third made her lips part slightly. The fourth took her back to a hospital room where her mother had hummed a tune so softly that Claire thought she had invented it from pain. No sheet music existed. No recording had survived. Claire had searched for it for years in old boxes, storage drives, rehearsal tapes, even among family friends who remembered Evelyn with polite admiration but never with the intimacy Claire needed. And now that hidden melody was coming from the same man she had invited onto the stage to amuse wealthy strangers. Preston leaned toward her with a nervous smile and whispered, "Well, this is unexpected." Claire did not answer. Across the room, Lily stepped from behind the curtain, her blue dress brushing her knees, her eyes shining not with surprise but recognition. She had heard this song before in the quiet apartment when her father thought she was asleep. Nathan kept playing, and every note seemed to ask the room a question it was not ready to face. What do you do when the person you mock turns out to be carrying the one truth you lost? For a long moment, nobody moved, because the ballroom had become something quieter than an event. It felt like a chapel hidden inside a skyscraper, dressed in candlelight, winter glass, and the soft shimmer of white roses arranged along every table. The city beyond the windows glowed blue and gold beneath the February sky, traffic sliding along Michigan Avenue like streams of tiny rubies, while inside Harrington Tower every polished surface held the reflection of a room slowly losing its pride. Nathan's hands moved with painful gentleness, not like a performer chasing admiration, but like a father returning a borrowed prayer. The melody climbed, then folded back on itself, tender as a voice trying not to break. A woman in a pearl necklace lowered her napkin to her lap and covered her mouth. A retired judge near the aisle took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. 2 waiters stood by the dessert table with plates of untouched lemon cake, listening as if their own childhoods had stepped through the doors. Claire felt the pressure of every camera, every donor, every guest waiting for her reaction, but for the first time in years, she did not know how to perform herself. Preston Blake shifted beside her, his smile thinning. "Claire," he murmured, "you may want to regain the room." She did not look at him. "Regain it from what?" "From him. He is playing my mother's song." Preston's jaw tightened, and for one flicker of a second, the easy confidence that had carried him through country clubs, board meetings, and private fundraisers slipped out of place. He had been the one who turned a missing pianist into entertainment. He had been the one who saw Nathan as a prop, a working man useful only when his humiliation could be wrapped as charm. But now the room was not laughing, and powerful people feared silence when it no longer belonged to them. Near the stage, Lily stood perfectly still, her small shoulders straight, her eyes fixed on her father. She had seen him tired. She had seen him hungry and pretending he was not. She had seen him fold overdue notices and place them under the coffee tin as if paper could stop hurting when hidden. But she had never seen him like this. Under the soft lights, Nathan looked almost younger, not because sorrow had left him, but because purpose had returned. His grey work shirt, his careful posture, the faint silver at his temples, the calm strength in his face, all of it seemed to belong exactly where it stood. Not below the guests. Not above them. Among them, as a human being. Then the music changed. A brighter phrase entered, fragile but brave, like morning finding its way across an old kitchen floor. Claire's breath caught. That was the part Evelyn used to hum when she brushed Claire's hair before school. That was the part no stranger could know. Claire took one step toward the stage, then another, her silver gown whispering over the marble. "Stop," Preston said softly. "Do not make this emotional." Claire turned to him with tears gathering in her eyes but steel returning to her voice. "That is exactly what my mother made music for." Nathan reached the final line, held one note in the air, and let it fade until the entire ballroom seemed to be breathing with him. No applause came at first. Only sobs. Real ones. Unplanned ones. The kind that money could not sponsor and pride could not silence. Claire reached the edge of the platform just as the last vibration disappeared into the high ceiling, and for the first time that evening, her beauty no longer looked carved from control. It looked human. Her eye stayed on Nathan's hands, those quiet hands that had emptied waste baskets, polished brass elevator doors, carried grocery bags home in the snow, tied Lily's shoes, counted medicine, and now uncovered a piece of Evelyn Harrington that money had never been able to recover. Nathan slowly lifted his fingers from the keys and stood, not bowing, not smiling, not asking for anything. The crowd remained suspended between grief and wonder, as if applause would be too small for what had happened. Claire's voice came out softer than anyone in the room had ever heard it. "Where did you learn that?" Nathan folded his hands in front of him. "From Evelyn." A shiver moved through the guests, not from cold, but from the sudden feeling that they had stepped into a story older than the gala itself. Claire swallowed. You knew my mother? Nathan looked toward the portrait behind her, the one showing Evelyn in a cream dress at a concert hall in New York, her fingers resting above the piano as if she were blessing it. She found me when I was 17, he said. I was playing on an out-of-tune upright in the basement of St. Andrew's Church on the south side. I was not supposed to be there. I was waiting for my father to finish a maintenance shift. Your mother heard me from the hallway. Claire did not blink. Around them, phones slowly lowered. Preston shifted, uncomfortable with a room that had stopped obeying the shape of wealth. Nathan continued, his voice calm, steady, almost reluctant. She asked who taught me. I told her nobody. She said that was not true. She said pain had taught me timing, and loneliness had taught me space. A woman near the front began crying again, quietly, without embarrassment. Claire pressed one hand against the piano, as if the wood itself might confirm what she was hearing. Nathan told them how Evelyn had paid for lessons without attaching her name, how she sent him sheet music in plain envelopes, how she made him practice scales before she let him touch anything beautiful. She did not praise easily. She did not flatter. She believed talent without character became noise. She used to say the room does not need to know you are wounded, Nathan said. It only needs to hear that you chose grace anyway. Lily stepped closer, small and proud, her blue dress catching the soft light near the steps. Claire looked at the child and saw something that humbled her more deeply than the music had, a daughter who had never known luxury yet had been raised with more respect than many children born inside gated estates. Why did you never tell anyone? Claire asked. Nathan gave the faintest smile, not bitter, not proud. Because I was not hired here to be remembered. Then he looked across the ballroom, past the jewels, past the cameras, past Preston's tightening expression, and added, and because some gifts are not meant to rescue a man's ego. They are meant to keep his soul alive. Preston Blake cleared his throat, and the small sound cut across the hush like a spoon striking fine china. He stepped closer to Claire, lowering his voice but not enough to hide the warning inside it. This is touching, Claire, but we have donors waiting, auction items to sell, and a program to finish. Nathan turned slightly, ready to leave the platform, because he understood rooms like this. Once truth made powerful people uncomfortable, they often tried to fold it away like a stained tablecloth. Claire looked at Preston, then at the rows of guests still watching with wet eyes and open faces. The program can wait, she said. Preston smiled without warmth. Can it? Or are we letting a maintenance employee rewrite your mother's legacy in front of the entire city? The words landed softly, but their meaning was plain. Lily reached for her father's hand. Nathan felt her fingers fit between his, small and trusting, and that simple pressure kept him from answering. With anger. He had taught her that dignity was not silence when truth needed air. It was choosing the right voice for the right moment. Claire heard it too, the insult hidden under professional language, and something in her expression changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But completely. Say that again, she said. Preston lifted his chin. I am saying we should verify his story before we turn it into tomorrow's headline. A few people shifted in their chairs. Snow tapped the tall windows like fingernails. The candles along the tables trembled in their glass holders. Nathan looked down at Lily, then back at Claire. He is not wrong to ask for proof, he said. Your mother believed truth should never be afraid of being examined. Claire stared at him for a second, struck by the sentence, because it sounded exactly like Evelyn. Not quoted for effect, not polished for sympathy, but remembered. There is a private archive, Claire whispered, mostly to herself. Mother's foundation transferred old recordings last year. Preston stiffened. That material is not prepared for public viewing. Neither was his humiliation, Claire replied. The room drew in a quiet breath. She turned to her assistant, a young woman named Maribel who had been standing near the side entrance with a tablet held against her chest. Bring up the foundation archive on the main screen. Search Nathan Whitaker. Search St. Andrew's Church. Search 1999. Maribel moved quickly, her hand shaking just enough to show she understood the moment had left the script behind. The huge screen above the stage, which had been displaying the Harrington Foundation logo in gold, faded to a dark search window. 300 guests watched letters appear one by one. Nathan stayed still, but inside him the past was opening like an old door. He remembered the basement at St. Andrews, the smell of coffee from the fellowship hall, the cracked green bench, the upright piano with a missing pedal, and Evelyn Harrington standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes, not because he played perfectly, but because he played honestly. Then Maribel gasped. A file appeared. Video archive. Evelyn Harrington. Masterclass. Guest student, Nathan Whitaker. Claire covered her mouth. The screen flickered, and there he was at 17, pale shirt, nervous shoulders, bright frightened eyes, sitting beside Evelyn while she spoke to a small group of students. Her voice filled the ballroom, gentle and clear. Remember this name, she said, from 25 years ago. Nathan Whitaker does not play to impress the world. He plays as if he is trying to forgive it. Preston did not move. Claire did not breathe. Nathan closed his eyes, and Lily whispered, "Daddy, she knew you." The old video filled the ballroom with a softer kind of light, grainy and warm, like memory rescued from a dusty attic. 17-year-old Nathan sat at the church piano with sleeves too short for his wrists and hope too large for his circumstances, while Evelyn Harrington stood beside him in a navy dress, one hand resting gently on the edge of the instrument. She was younger than Claire had allowed herself to remember, not the fragile woman from the hospital room, but a radiant teacher with laughter in her eyes and conviction in her voice. "A gift is not a crown," Evelyn said on the screen. "It is a responsibility. And this young man understands that better than many people twice his age." Claire trembled as if the sentence had found the exact place where her heart had been hiding. Nathan lowered his head, unable to watch himself being loved by someone who had believed in him before life became narrow hallways, unpaid bills, and midnight shifts. Lily squeezed his hand again. "She sounds kind," she whispered. Nathan answered without looking away from the floor. "She was." The video shifted to music. Young Nathan began to play, and the tune was the same melody he had just given the Gala, only unfinished then, still searching for its final shape. Evelyn watched him with pride so quiet it felt sacred. Then the recording ended, leaving the giant screen dark and the Harrington Foundation logo slowly returning like a curtain after a confession. Nobody applauded. The room had moved beyond applause. Claire walked to the piano bench and touched the place where Nathan had been sitting, as though apology could travel through polished wood. Preston forced a small laugh, but it sounded lonely when it reached the tables. "Well," he said, smoothing his jacket, "that certainly explains the song. Still, sentiment does not change the fact that this evening has been derailed." A white-haired donor in the front row looked up at him. "No, Mr. Blake," she said quietly. "It has finally arrived." A murmur of agreement passed through the guests, not loud, not angry, simply awake. Preston's face tightened. "This foundation depends on serious leadership." Claire turned toward him. Her tears had not ruined her elegance. They had made it honest. "My mother's foundation depends on respect." "Claire, think carefully." "I am." "This could affect investor confidence." "Then perhaps our investors should learn what confidence looks like when it kneels before truth." The word settled over the room with the clean force of church bells. Nathan stepped down from the platform, ready to gather Lily and disappear before gratitude became another spotlight. But Lily did not move. She looked at Preston, then at Claire, then at the guests whose expensive clothes could no longer protect them from what they had witnessed. "My daddy never wanted people to know he was special," she said, her voice small but steady. "He only wanted people to stop treating him like he was nothing." That was when Claire finally broke. Not in weakness, but in recognition. She lowered herself until she was eye level with Lily and said, "Your father is not nothing. He is the part of my mother's story I was too proud to find." Claire remained there before Lily, not kneeling to make a scene, but lowering herself because truth had brought everyone in that magnificent room to the same height. The chandelier light spilled across her silver gown, across Lily's blue dress, across Nathan's worn black shoes still dusted faintly with salt from the winter sidewalk, and the distance between billion-dollar power and one small apartment on the west side suddenly felt less like fate and more like a lie people had agreed to believe. Nathan gently placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "You do not have to defend me, sweetheart." Lily looked up at him. "I know." "Then why did you?" "Because you always defend everybody else quietly." That sentence reached places no speech could have touched. Several guests bowed their heads. A young waiter near the back wiped his face with the corner of his sleeve. Claire stood slowly, her eyes still damp, and faced the ballroom with a kind of courage she had never needed in a board meeting. "When I invited Nathan to this piano, I did not see him," she said. "I saw a uniform. I saw a position. I saw someone I could use to make this room laugh." Preston stepped forward at once. "Claire, I strongly advise against public self-blame." She turned toward him with calm clarity. "That is because you have mistaken accountability for weakness." He opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, the man who had always known what to say found no sentence powerful enough to rescue his pride. Claire looked back at Nathan. "I am sorry," she said, and the simplicity of it made the room ache. "Not because the cameras are here. Not because my mother knew you. I am sorry because you deserved respect before anyone learned you were gifted." Nathan held her gaze. He could have wounded her with the truth. He could have named every night her executives had ignored him, every careless joke, every time kindness had been treated like something poor people owed the rich. But Nathan had not survived by collecting bitterness. He had survived by choosing what would not own him. "Your apology belongs to more than me," he said gently. Claire nodded, understanding before he explained. She turned toward the staff lined along the walls, the cooks visible through the service doors, the attendants near the coat room, the janitorial crew standing uncertainly by the side entrance. "Then let me say it properly," she said. "To every person who made this evening possible while the rest of us stood under the lights, I am sorry for forgetting that dignity is not assigned by a job title." The first applause came from the kitchen doorway, one soft clap, then another from the coat room, then the tables joined, not loud at first, but growing into something warmer than admiration. It was respect waking up. Preston looked around and realized he was standing alone inside his own arrogance. Claire removed the foundation speech cards from the podium, tore them neatly in half, and placed them beside the microphone. "Tonight's auction is cancelled," she said. A stunned breath moved through the guests. "Tomorrow morning, Harrington Global will endow the Evelyn Harrington Music Fellowship for children whose families cannot afford lessons, instruments, transportation, or performance fees. The first teacher we will invite, if he accepts, is Nathan Whitaker." Every face turned to him. Lily's fingers tightened around his hand. Nathan looked at the piano, then at his daughter, then at the portrait of Evelyn watching over them with that same soft smile from another lifetime. "I will not be part of a publicity story," he said. Claire answered immediately. "Then we will not make one. And Lily will not receive special treatment because of me. Then she will audition like every other child." Lily straightened at that, brave enough to be nervous, proud enough to try. Nathan gave one slow nod. In the stillness that followed, Claire walked to the piano and touched a single key, uncertain and trembling. The note was imperfect, but honest. Nathan smiled for the first time that night, and somehow that was the sound the room remembered most. By the time the last guest left Harrington Tower, the snow had softened the city into something almost holy, covering the curbs, the awnings, the roofs of waiting cars, and the brass letters above the entrance with a clean white hush. Inside the ballroom, the flowers were being gathered, the candles were being blown out, and the grand piano stood beneath the dimmed lights like a witness that had finally been allowed to speak. Nathan had changed back into his work jacket, though no one asked him to clean another inch of floor. Lily walked beside him with both hands around a paper cup of warm apple cider the kitchen staff had insisted she take, her cheeks pink, her eyes brighter than the skyline. Claire followed them to the lobby, no assistants, no cameras, no polished announcement waiting on her tongue. For once, she seemed less like a woman who owned the building and more like a daughter standing in the doorway of a memory she had nearly lost. "Mr. Whittaker," she said, then stopped herself. "Nathan." He turned. "Yes, m." Claire gave a small, aching smile. "Claire is fine." Lily looked between them and grinned, but Nathan remained measured, not cold, only careful. People with power often felt sincere after midnight and practical by morning. He had learned to let promises prove themselves in daylight. Claire seemed to understand. She held out a cream envelope embossed with Evelyn Harrington's initials. "This was in the archive room," she said. "My mother left letters for several students. I never opened this one because I never knew who it belonged to." Nathan took it slowly. His name was written across the front in Evelyn's hand, elegant and slanted, as if she had expected him to return someday. He did not open it there. Some sacred things deserved kitchen tables, quiet lamps, and a child asleep in the next room. "Thank you," he said. Claire nodded. "Tomorrow, my legal team will begin the fellowship paperwork. The staff wage review begins Monday. And Preston Blake resigned from the foundation board 10 minutes ago." Nathan did not smile at that. "I hope he learned something before he loses more than a title." Claire looked down, humbled by the grace of a man who had every right to enjoy another person's shame and chose not to. Outside, her driver held open the rear door of a black town car, but Nathan glanced toward the bus stop across the avenue. Claire noticed. "Please let me drive you and Lily home." Nathan shook his head gently. "Not tonight. She and I started this day ordinary. I would like to finish it that way." Lily slipped her hand into his. "Can ordinary have pancakes tomorrow?" Nathan finally laughed, soft and real. "Ordinary can have pancakes if ordinary gets some sleep." Claire watched them walk out into the snow, father and daughter moving under the streetlights with no orchestra, no applause, no wealthy audience to validate them. Just footsteps. Just breath in the cold air. Just dignity carrying itself home. 3 months later, the Evelyn Harrington Music Fellowship opened in a restored brick building on the south side, 6 miles from the church basement where Evelyn had once found a frightened boy at an old piano. Children arrived with borrowed coats, nervous parents, dented instrument cases, and dreams too large for their zip codes. Claire came every Saturday, not as a donor for photographs, but as a volunteer who learned names, carried folding chairs, and listened. Nathan taught the first class. He did not teach them how to impress. He taught them how to listen, how to breathe, how to let sorrow become beauty without letting it become bitterness. Lily auditioned like everyone else, hands shaking, voice clear, singing the melody her father had once hidden from the world. When she finished, Nathan had tears in his eyes, and Claire did too. No one called it charity. No one called it luck. It was redemption, built one lesson at a time. And years later, whenever people asked Nathan why he returned to music after so much silence, he never mentioned the gala first. He mentioned his daughter. He mentioned Evelyn. He mentioned a room full of people who learned, for one unforgettable night, that respect should never wait for proof of greatness. Because quiet dignity is still dignity before the first note is played.